Fun fact, did you know that Lara Croft is 53 years old? That's right, the OG Lara Croft from the original timeline was born in 1968. That's a lot of years of raiding tombs. Now in her 50s, I'm assuming she's given up her days of adventuring and gunslinging. I like to imagine her chilling back at Croft Manor, sipping tea and thinking about the good old days. Let's reminisce with Lara and look back at her adventures, the places she's visited, and of course, the food she had along the way. This is Tomb Raider, the official cookbook and travel guide. So this is new. I've reviewed cookbooks before, but this is the first time I'm seeing a cookbook and travel guide hybrid. Tomb Raider, the official cookbook and travel guide, authored by Sebastian Haley and Megan Marie with recipes by Tara Teo Harris, is a chronicle of Lara Croft's many adventures around the globe. The book is divided into 5 chapters, each one dedicated to a continent with recipes from the different countries Lara has visited in the games. There's a lot of information and factoids about the different regions and landmarks. I really appreciate the amount of travel guides and recipe consultants they reached out to ensure the accuracy and authenticity of information in the food. They reached out to a lot of people, so there are plenty of different voices and perspectives in here, which is great. There's even a travel tips and tricks section at the end that talks about traveling best practices, so it really does work well as a travel guide. There are also plenty of callbacks and images that highlight the role that these places played in the different Tomb Raider games. There are a lot of screenshots from the games, and the text often refers to certain segments, so Tomb Raider fans are going to get a stroll down memory lane when reading this. One thing that I think might be a missed opportunity is that the book is not written in Lara's perspective. When reading this, it feels like I'm reading a wiki page or one of those Lonely Planet travel guides, which is okay, but for a series with such an iconic and titular character in Lara Croft, it would have been nice to get a sense of her personality in the writing. If this was written in first person as if it's her journal, then I think it would have been more immersive and would have better fit the theme of globe-trotting adventure that is Tomb Raider. In terms of visuals, I think the photos are nice and well staged. I like how they introduce elements of Lara's character in the images by having her gear and accessories beside the food. That's a pretty cool design element. But I have to point out that this cookbook is guilty of one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to cookbooks. Not all recipes have photos. I would have loved to see how big the T-Rex ribeye is or what a pak chuk even looks like. I think food photos are so important because A, it entices me to want to eat it, and B, it gives me an idea of what the end result looks like so I know if I'm on the right track. This cookbook is also one of the thinner cookbooks I own, so I think they could have tossed a few more pages in there for photos, you know what I'm saying? But let's not judge a cookbook by its lack of photos. The real test is in the kitchen. I'll be doing 3 recipes that will take us on a mini international journey filled with highs and lows. Let's start in Lara's home country of England with breakfast at Croft Manor. We're starting with beans and toast. Another fun fact, this is Lara Croft's favorite dish, so let's get it right. In a pot, mix together 1 cup of vegetable broth, half a cup of ketchup, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, half a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of garlic powder, half a teaspoon of onion powder, and half a teaspoon of black pepper. Stir it all up, then add 2 14-ounce cans of medium white beans such as navy or cannellini. Make sure they're rinsed and drained before you add them. 2 tablespoons of light brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, then bring your pot to a boil. Once it boils, lower the heat to medium-low and let it simmer for 20 minutes with no cover and stir it from time to time so it doesn't stick. In a separate bowl, mix together 1 tablespoon of cornstarch with a 1/4 cup of water to make a slurry and then add that to the pot while stirring so you can evenly incorporate it. Cook for 2 more minutes until the sauce is nice and thick. Now all you need is some buttered toast and spread your baked beans on top, then finish it off with a sprinkling of cheddar cheese. Simple. Now we head to Africa to visit one of Lara's most visited locales from her early adventures, Egypt, to make some tamia, which is also commonly known as Egyptian falafel. The recipe calls for 2 cups of dried fava beans soaked overnight, then rinsed and drained. But I couldn't find any dried fava beans in the store, and the only ones I found were frozen, so I just defrosted those, drained it, and made sure it was as dry as possible. In my head this made sense, but I quickly found out that this was very, very stupid. I placed the beans in a blender with 1 tablespoon of minced garlic, 1 diced yellow onion, 2 tablespoons of minced parsley, 2 tablespoons of tahini, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, half a tablespoon of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper, and half a teaspoon of paprika. Process it until you get a pasty consistency. When I checked mine, it was still pretty runny, so I decided to add more fava beans, hoping that it will thicken. At this point, I was pretty concerned because I don't think this is the consistency I'm looking for, but the show must go on. Roll the mixture into golf-sized balls and get ready to fry. In a pan, heat up about an inch worth of vegetable oil to 350 degrees Fahrenheit over medium heat and place the balls, making sure that it's not overcrowded. Fry it in multiple batches if you have to. Fry for 3 minutes, then turn it over to the other side and fry for 2 more minutes until it's golden brown. Unfortunately for me, mine disintegrated into the oil and wasn't cooking, so my falafel was a fail. My suspicion is that because I didn't use dried fava beans, my mixture ended up being too wet and couldn't hold itself together. It sucks, but learning is a part of cooking, and sometimes we fail. I'll take the blame for this, but one thing I'm not taking the fall for is the lack of sesame seeds. In the book's photo, the ta'amiyya is beautifully coated with sesame seeds, but it's not listed at all in the ingredients or mentioned in the steps. Because of that, I didn't put it in my grocery list and was bummed out when I found out later. I did have some black sesame seeds though, so I used that instead and coated some of the balls before frying. I was hoping that extra layer of sesame seeds will help hold the shape, but nope, still a failure. I'm pretty sure I just committed a crime against Egyptian cuisine, so let's flee and move on to our next location, the lush South American country of Peru, to try a traditional Peruvian stir-fry, Lomo Saltado. First, we're gonna make some fries. Peel 3 russet potatoes and cut them into half-inch strips, soak in cold water for an hour, then rinse and pat dry. In a large pot, heat 3 inches of vegetable oil to 325 degrees Fahrenheit and fry the potatoes. Again, don't overcrowd and do it in batches if you have to. Cook for 6 minutes, then remove them and set them on a paper-lined plate. Now you're going to raise the temp of the oil to 400 degrees and double fry those taters for 5 minutes until they're golden brown. Take them out and salt to taste. Now let's make the stir-fry sauce. In a small bowl, combine 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, 1.5 tablespoons of white vinegar, 3 cloves of minced garlic, and 2 teaspoons of cumin. That's our sauce. For the meat, we have this beautiful pound of tenderloin steak. This thing is pretty pricey, so I think it's okay to sub it with sirloin instead. It just won't be as tender. Slice the meat against the grain into thin strips and season with salt and pepper. Now it's frying time. Heat 2 tablespoons of oil and fry the steak until it's nicely browned. For me, it was about 2 minutes per side. Then remove them from the pan, and then now you're going to toss in half a red onion cut into wedges and cook that for about 3 minutes. Then add in 2 tomatoes cut in wedges. The recipe also calls for 1 ají amarillo pepper, but since I couldn't find a fresh one, I'm substituting it with 1 pickled yellow pepper for the heat and half a yellow bell pepper for the fresh crunch. Add those in and cook for another 3 minutes. Then add the stir-fry sauce and cook for another minute. Finally, add in the steak and a tablespoon of minced cilantro, mix it up, and you're done cooking. Now this next part is optional, but trust me, you're gonna want to make this. This is the ají verde sauce. In a blender, mix in half a cup of mayo, 2 tablespoons of lime juice, 1 large bunch of cilantro chopped up, 1 chopped up clove of garlic, 1 tablespoon of ají amarillo paste. If you can't find that, just replace it with 1 jalapeno. Then 2 teaspoons of huacatay paste, but if you're like me and can't find this, then use 1 tablespoon of chopped mint instead. Then 2 tablespoons of cotija cheese, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. Blend it together and chill it for an hour. Let's put everything together. Layer a bed of white rice on a plate, then mix the fries and the stir fry right before you eat it so the fries don't get soggy, and lay that on the rice. Have your ají verde nearby if you want to add some creamy heat, and that's your lomo saltado. Now enough with the traveling, let's get to eating. Starting off with the beans on toast. I've only ever had baked beans from a can, and not gonna lie, I do like those. Now for these homemade ones. Yep, they're pretty good. They do feel less mushy than the canned ones. I can actually feel the pop of the beans, which is nice. What's good about this is that you can control the seasoning and sweetness. I find some canned beans to be too sugary and sweet, so it's nice to be able to control the flavor. And it's not that hard to make, so whenever I'm craving baked beans, I might have to try this homemade version more often. Now for the ta'amiyya, I'm scared, but we've gone this far. I doused it with tahini to try to mask my kitchen sins, and it didn't help. This thing is so mushy. It's got the worst mouthfeel ever. You can definitely taste the fava beans, but texture-wise, this is one of the worst things I've ever made. Again, this isn't necessarily the book's fault since I made some substitutions, but I wish I knew exactly where I messed up. If you're a pro at falafels, please post in the comments so you can prevent me and many others from making this atrocious mistake. Finally, we move on to the Lomo Saltado. Can this redeem my falafel failure? Let me tell you, this is love at first bite. Where has this been all my life? It takes everything I love, tender meat, crispy fries, rice, spicy peppers, and puts it all together. It feels like this dish was custom made just for me. I was having a great time, and just when I thought it couldn't get any better, I added the ají verde sauce, and that just took it to the next level. The freshness of the mint and the creaminess of the cheese just added even more depth to the many layers of flavors in this dish. I wish I didn't have to make any ingredient substitution so I can get as close to the real thing as possible, but I do appreciate that the book prioritizes authenticity over ease because a lot of cookbooks can't claim that. After this though, I'm definitely Googling some good Peruvian restaurants nearby because this dish was eye-opening. My final verdict for this cookbook: informative and authentic, but needs more pics.